Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating psychology behind your most misunderstood behaviors. You know, we all have those little things we do that society might quietly judge, or let's be real, that we quietly judge ourselves for. But today, we're going to look at the actual science of why your brain operates exactly the way it does. I mean, think about it for a second. Have you ever felt judged for these specific, highly relatable traits? Do you ever find yourself standing in a half-empty parking lot 20 minutes before an appointment just to feel, grounded? Or do you constantly cancel plans on a Friday night because your couch just feels like an absolute sanctuary? Or hey, do you ever stare blankly at someone who literally just introduced themselves 3 seconds ago because their name simply vanished from your brain? If so, trust me, you are absolutely not alone. So here's how these random-seeming habits actually map to a brilliantly unified psychological architecture. In this explainer, we'll quickly cover the myth of being broken, navigating the social world, how generations shape us, the psychology of control, finding peace and stillness, and finally, the power of cognitive diversity. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The myth of being broken. You are wired, not flawed. Right out of the gate, I really want to reframe how you see yourself. It's not a flaw, it's architecture. The behaviors you've been apologizing for your entire life, the things you thought were signs that you were aloof or anxious or just awkward, they're actually structural responses. Your brain is actively protecting you. It's optimizing for your environment and processing information in a completely different but highly efficient way. Moving on to Section 2, navigating the social world. This is the science of memory and modern tribes. So let's look at how our brains handle intense social pressures, starting with that classic problem, forgetting names. This brilliantly illustrates what researchers call the Baker-Baker paradox. Picture this. When you meet someone new, your working memory is juggling like 6 things at once. You're reading their face, figuring out context, wondering what to say next. And right into this cognitive chaos, they hand you a completely arbitrary sound, their name. Now, if someone tells you they are a baker by profession, your brain lights up with semantic context, bread, flour, waking up early. But if they tell you their last name is Baker, it's semantically empty. It triggers absolutely zero context. So forgetting a name isn't a lack of caring, it's just your brain straight up refusing to hold on to isolated, rootless data. And honestly, this gets even worse with the next in-line effect. If you have any kind of social anxiety or just hyperactive self-awareness, you're essentially editing your own performance in real time. Your internal monologue is so incredibly loud. Is my handshake too firm? Am I making enough eye contact? That it just bulldozes incoming information like names. You aren't fully present because you're already half a step into what comes next. Now, speaking of social dynamics, we've got to talk about the 60% of Americans who follow sports religiously. We humans are tribal creatures, right? And sports are our modern tribes. When fans watch their team play, their brains release oxytocin. That's the exact same bonding hormone that makes you love your family. Plus, they're getting these massive dopamine hits from the unpredictable, intermittent reinforcement of the game. It is a literal chemical rush. But wait, what about the people who couldn't care less? Well, comparing sports fans to non-sports fans reveals some super fascinating differences. People who are indifferent to sports often have lower tribal instincts and a more individualistic, stable self-concept that just doesn't rely on external victories. They prefer direct engagement over parasocial investment. So, if you don't care about sports, you aren't boring. No way. You just allocate your empathy differently, and you probably seek your flow states elsewhere, like in art, nature, or personal projects. That brings us to Section 3, how generations shape us. Let's talk about the invisible conditioning of Gen X and Xennials. To really understand this, get a load of this number. By 1984, approximately 7 million latchkey kids between the ages of 5 and 13 were regularly unsupervised after school. Generation X literally grew up coming home to empty houses. And you know what that bred? Intense self-reliance and what psychologists call defensive pessimism. They learned super early on that you can't always count on someone being there to help, and they watched the adults around them constantly changing the rules of the game. That kind of upbringing created a high contingency environment. What that means is if you stepped out of line, you paid for it right then and there. There was absolutely no buffer time. This childhood reality forged a brain that is constantly thinking 3 steps ahead just to predict consequences in real time. It's exactly why this generation is incredibly capable at handling crises, even if that capability stems from a deeply ingrained unwillingness to depend on anybody else. And then there's the specific timeline of the Xennials. those born roughly between 1976 and 1985. Their experience is incredibly unique. They had an analog childhood filled with pure boredom and clunky rotary phones, but right as they hit their late teens and 20s, the digital world just exploded. Because the prefrontal cortex was still maturing and highly plastic during this exact transition, they developed this rare technological bilingualism. They totally understand the value of being truly disconnected, but they aren't the least bit intimidated by new software or social media.
All right, section 4, the psychology of control. Let's look at the secret mechanics of the fixer.
Let's explore how early life experiences create those specific people who never seem to panic and who just know how to solve any crisis placed in front of them. The absolutely crucial point here is that fixers aren't born with magic skills. They rely on a concept identified by psychologist Albert Bandura called self-efficacy. Now, this isn't just general optimism. It's the highly specific, deeply ingrained belief that, hey, I have handled things before, and this unpredictable thing right in front of me, it's handleable. You can see a stark contrast when you compare the fixers to the avoider. Fixers operate with an internal locus of control and have a remarkably high tolerance for ambiguity. When something breaks, they don't view it as some stressful verdict on their lives. They look at it with mild curiosity, kind of like a puzzle. Avoiders, on the other hand, have a really low tolerance for ambiguity. They need immediate resolution and reassurance, or else the anxiety just completely takes over. But here's the best part. Self-efficacy is built, not given. You build it through what Bandura called mastery experiences. We're talking about wiggling a wire to fix a lamp, rebooting a frozen computer, stopping a bleeding cut with pressure, or just tightening a loose screw yourself. These aren't heroic acts. They are tiny, practical wins that teach a developing brain that the world is not just something that happens to you, but something you can actively reach right into and change. Next up, Section 5, Finding Peace and Stillness. This explains why staying home or arriving early is actually a biological need. We're going to decode those behaviors that society so often labels as boring or anxious. The big aha moment for introverts and homebodies comes down to optimal arousal theory. This principle dictates the exact amount of stimulation your specific nervous system requires to feel good. Some people need a ton of it, others need very little. So it's not about fear, and it's definitely not laziness. It's just raw biology. Wildly different environments affect different nervous systems in completely opposite ways. Think about a high-stimulation setting, like a crowded bar with unpredictable noise. For an extrovert, that is recharging and energizing. But for someone with a low-stimulation preference, that exact same environment is incredibly draining. For them, a quiet space with controlled lighting is peaceful and restorative. So controlling the vibe at home isn't hiding from the world. It's a highly strategic choice for your creativity, self-awareness, and honestly, your survival. And you know what? This totally explains the chronically early people too. Waiting in a half-empty parking lot 20 minutes before an appointment is a genius synthesis of everything we've talked about today. It's securing emotional armor against unpredictable chaos. It's exerting that internal locus of control and achieving a daily mastery experience. By arriving before the crowd, you get to control the environmental stimulation as the room slowly fills up. It literally allows you to recharge in stillness before the event even begins. Finally, Section 6, the power of cognitive diversity, reframing your everyday quirks. Let's bring all of this together now. I want to remind you of this powerful quote. You don't have a memory problem, you have a preoccupation problem. Your brain is an unbelievably efficient machine that ruthlessly prioritizes rich context, high emotion, and complex puzzles over arbitrary details and empty social performances. Your wiring is highly associative, deeply observant, and perfectly calibrated to your specific history. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. What if the very behavior you've been hiding is actually your mind's greatest, most beautiful adaptation? Whether you're staying home to recharge, arriving early to command your environment, or quietly fixing the world's broken things without asking for credit, you aren't broken. You're just playing a completely different game. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep embracing the fascinating architecture of your mind.